Welcome to Secrets of Stand-Up Comedy. I'm Dick Williams. I'm going to tell you everything I know about stand-up so you could be a better comic. I want to talk to you about stealing. It is the one rule you cannot break in comedy. Nobody likes a thief. There are very serious repercussions. As you probably know from watching what happened with Carlos Mencia, there's been plenty of other examples. We live in an age now with Google, with these search engines. You can type in what your joke is and do a search. And be specific, but be general. And also look at the images. Click on that image bar, because there might be a meme with your joke. There's not really a lot of excuses. If you get caught stealing material, you're done for. There's only one way to come back, and I'll talk about that, because that's the difference between Robin Williams and Carlos Mencia. If you get nothing else from this video, it's this: never, ever, ever steal. Ever. And don't try to make excuses for it. If you make a mistake, correct the mistake. If it's parallel thinking, make sure the person who accused you of stealing knows it. Like, fully explain yourself. Say, hey, I didn't even see you do it. Or, you know what? I didn't even think about it. Maybe what you said got into my head and subconsciously it came out, but I was not trying to steal. I will drop the bit. If you are the one being accused and there's any chance that it could have been stolen by you, even if you didn't do it intentionally, you have to make sure it's right. You have to drop the bit. Let me tell you a quick story about the repercussions. In the early 2000s, I was out in Los Angeles, and a rumor went around that a comic who I knew, and I had already distanced myself from him, he was stealing. And even getting a whiff of that, you start questioning everything about that person. And this is how the story goes. I don't know what's verifiable, what's not. I heard it from very credible sources. He left LA and went to Boston. And I'm purposely not going to mention anybody's names because, again, I don't know every aspect of it and what's true and what's false. So I'm just going to use it as an anonymous example. But he moved to Boston and was doing well there, was making friends and all that. And he started getting college gigs all around Massachusetts and Connecticut. At these gigs, they can be notoriously hard. Sometimes you're performing in a student cafeteria. It's daytime. There's not a lot of people there. They're not paying attention. Or it could be great. But I think during some of these, he was having a difficult time, or he didn't have enough material. So word got out that he was doing other comics' bits to pad his time, to fill out the requirement when he was doing these college gigs. So a bunch of comics from Boston showed up at one of the college gigs, and they sat way in the back so he couldn't see them. Then he did some of their bits. He thought that he could do it somewhat out of town and get away with it. So what was the fallout? Well, he was doing, comics in Boston, they're a little bit rough. They invited him to do one of the many showcases. I think it was Nick's Comedy Stop. And he was on the show probably with 12 comics that night. And instead of letting him go on, they had him in the green room. The host would go up. After the host would go up, he'd come back, they'd close the door, and he'd slap the hell out of him. And then once the first comic came out, he would go in the green room, and if he stole from him, he would slap the hell out of him. And I guess this went on all night. Now, I don't condone that type of stuff. I think there's better ways to handle it. But sometimes people don't get the message. Realize that when you're stealing from another comic, First of all, you know how long it takes to come up with a killer bit. To just have it stolen from you, they're not just stealing a bit, they're stealing your livelihood. They're stealing a bit of your dream. That's why it's so forbidden. Because not only are they taking this from you and you can't do it again, if you don't realize that that's happening, the audience and maybe even other comics who've seen the thief do that bit, when they see you do it, they're going to think you stole it. And so now people might think that you're the thief. It's horrible. That's why comics hate it. A thief is making money off of someone else's hard work, and they're ruining it for that comic because that comic can't do that bit anymore. So again, never, ever, ever steal a joke, someone's mannerisms. I had somebody steal transition lines from me. And I had to say, hey, this may not seem clear cut to you, but if I go up right afterwards, we're saying the exact same transition lines, and your joke, while it's cleverly disguised as being your own, it's close enough to mine that I know you stole it. The audience isn't going to know you stole it. But if they hear me do the transition line, they're going to think that I stole from you because they're hearing you first. Now, I want to talk about Robin Williams and Carlos Mencia. Many of you may not know, because it happened a long time ago, that Robin Williams was a notorious joke thief. In his early days in the 70s and 80s out in San Francisco, audiences and network execs were just astounded at his ability to go on stage and rattle off all these hilarious things, and it looked like he was just coming up with them. And even I, as a novice, would watch that. I'm like, how does he do all of that? Well, he had watched all the other comics. He knew all their bits, so he could just free associate and then go into one of their bits. And he would watch a comic, and this is all documented. You can Google it. He would watch a comic, and they would do a funny bit, and the next night he would do it on The Tonight Show. What recourse does that comic have? There was no internet. They couldn't go complain. The whole Elmer Fudd thing was somebody's closing bit. Imagine having your closing bit taken by Robin Williams, and you're trying to explain to the audience, who are they? Who do you think they're going to believe? They're going to believe Robin Williams. They're going to think, well, you're a nobody. Yeah, Robin Williams stole from you. That's why he got away with it. Until he did it to enough comics that there were repercussions. And I don't know what those would have been, but there was a period of time where Robin's manager would answer his phone at his office and go, all right, how much do I owe you and who do I make the check out to? So at least Robin, through his manager, they were paying the comics. But even still, that's not good enough. They didn't agree to sell the joke. You're paying for something that you took, something that you stole. But it was something. Again, I'm not trying to make him seem more innocent. I'm just giving as much information as I can from what I know. Carlos Mencia. Before the whole Rogan thing happened, I was in Los Angeles during that time. I had the opportunity to write for Mind of Mencia. A friend of mine had it in there, let's just say. I don't want to get too deep into what his position was, but he said, hey, do you want to submit a writing packet? And I could have gotten the job easily. And I said no, because I already knew the rumors. I was friends with a lot of Latino comics, and they would tell me about Carlos that, and I'm not saying anything out of school. I'm not bashing him. I feel bad for him in a way, which I'll get into. But he would take people on the road to open for him, And usually when you're the feature act, you do all your best stuff the first show so that the headliner can't steal it, or the headliner can't say to you, you're not stepping on one of their premises because you don't know. So you do all your best stuff that first night, and then if the headliner says, hey, I have a joke similar, can you drop that? Then you drop it. But generally the headliner has enough material where they won't do that. But you also do it to establish this is who I am, this is what I do, this is my best material. Well, by the second night, Carlos, I guess, was doing the bits, even after they did it right in front of him. And a lot of times a thief's justification is, well, I do it better than you. Well, so that's like the most ridiculous. And I've even seen fans, when fans of Carlos were defending him online, they're like, yeah, but he puts his own spin on it and he does it way better. Yeah, but if somebody steals my car, they can't go, well, I drive it better than you. They still stole my fucking car. And so comics would start saying, hey, I'm not opening for Carlos. So that's why I turned it down, because I just didn't want to be associated with any of that, because I knew how bad it is. How bad it is for comedy, how bad it is for comics, and how bad it would have been for me, just for my conscience, let alone my career. That's almost secondary. I can't even take jokes from friends most of the time. I can't even take a lot of suggestions from comics because my material is so personal to me. I want it to be what I think of and what my views are. Once in a while I will. My friend Gavin, I can't say his full Christian name, but he and I were talking last night and he said something very funny, and then we started riffing on it, and I said, you know what, I might use that. And he goes, yeah, use that in your act. He's not a comic, and I was like, oh, I can use that in my little sketches. But yeah, for somebody to steal that from me, I've had so many jokes stolen from me. I saw one of my jokes in Huffington Post, where they post their best Thanksgiving jokes. This was a long time ago. I really liked the comic that stole it from me. I'm like, why would he do that? To get in the Huffington Post? There's not even money in it. He's just getting a mention. So it destroys friendships, and it's bad. Here's the problem with Carlos Mencia. He's gone on many podcasts since then and denied it. He denied the whole incident with Joe Rogan. He says he doesn't steal. Who do I apologize to? Tell me the comic. He stole from so many people, from what I understand, that he needs to do a blanket apology. Not this, trying to get off on a technicality. A couple things that I do want to say that I don't think were fair to Carlos. And you might turn on me for this. I don't care. I have to say what I think is right. When that whole firestorm happened, people were going after him because his real name is Ned. That has nothing to do with stealing, okay? That was unfair to attack him that way. The other thing that was really weird to me was what they called him out on was like such a hacky premise that Ari was doing, that if they're going to build the wall, it's funny, a lot of people don't know this. They were talking about building a wall in California long before Trump came along. But if they're going to build a wall, who's going to build it? Well, it's going to be Mexicans. Everybody who was around at that time knew of a version of that joke, even if they didn't have it themselves. So to say that he stole that, yeah, could be. He doesn't get the benefit of the doubt, but you don't want to bust somebody in such a public way for a hacky premise. And by hacky, I mean it was done to death by that point, and it was a very obvious, easy joke. But they did nail him dead to rights on that Cosby bit. And so that's what happened. All this other stuff got called into question, and he got exposed. The internet's there now. You can watch Bill Cosby. You can watch him. You see that it's the same bit. Here's the difference between Robin Williams and Carlos Mencia. Robin Williams finally admitted to it at some point. I think it was the early 2000s, maybe 99, 2000. I believe it was in a Rolling Stone interview. And from what I remember, I tried researching. You can Google it. I don't have time for all that nonsense. I'm just trying to make an overall point. But from what I understand, he said that, you know, he just absorbed all this stuff and it came out. And he was on a lot of drugs at the time. And I don't fully buy that, but he apologized. He came clean. And then I remember this distinctly at the Comedy Store when he would walk in, this again, early 2000s, whoever was performing on stage would freeze. They'd stop talking. They'd stop performing. And Robin would notice and realize what was happening. And he humbled himself. He went and sat in the green room and waited until it was his turn to go up, and then he would come out so that he would not be accused of stealing. And it allowed the comics with less cachet, with less pull at the club, to go and perform without worrying that one of the biggest names in show business was going to steal their act. What did Carlos do? He continues to deny it to this day. If he had just come out and said, I didn't think of it as stealing at the time, I understand now, it won't ever happen again. I want to pay the people that have valid claims against me. I want to apologize to them face to face. All of this would have gone away. But he may be at the point where he thinks in his mind he's lied to himself enough that he believes his own lie, that he never stole. I know for a fact that he stole material. I talked to somebody who knows for a fact, and I can't get into the details. I don't think it's too late for Carlos to do that. It would be extremely humbling for him, but I don't know. He seems like he's all right. He's got millions of dollars. He's had his fame. I think he still performs. That's where I feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for him that he really did dedicate his life to comedy, and he was super famous and super good at what he did, but he took the fatal shortcut, and he couldn't bring himself to apologize and admit what he did. One final time, don't ever steal. If you get accused of stealing, clear it up immediately. Stop doing the bit. Explain yourself. Don't let that stain follow you around, because it is so hard to get that off of you. That's it. I will see you tomorrow with another one of these. And this isn't exciting news, but it may help you. I'm taking all of these videos from YouTube and I'm going to put them into a podcast. And because I'll have 100 soon, I'll probably release 10 a week. They're relatively short. And that way you can listen when you're doing other stuff instead of having to watch my usually overly bundled up self. It's getting cold here in the Northeast, so I don't have to turn my heat down so that it's nice and chilly like David Letterman used to have in his studio. That's why I've said this before, but that's why I wear the scarves and the hats and the jackets. And also I like looking different at different times. And I'm still going to stick with Dick Williams, but man, Bingo Willie is starting to grow on me. I don't know if I have a Bingo Willie act, but I like that stage name because I love my dogs so much. I'll see you tomorrow.